as soon as it leaked, I thought there's less chance he's going to take the stand now. I think that Dick and Jim are just playing with the prosecution's head.
Welcome to the global phenomenon, Surviving the Survivor, where we're all just trying to survive in a rough world.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the best guests in all of true crime. And today we certainly deliver. It is week 4 of the Alex Murdaugh double murder trial. He is accused, of course, of killing both his wife, Maggie, and son, Paul. And there's been some pretty gruesome testimony that we're going to get to. But all of that is just a fraction of the story. Best guest joining us today, the woman in green. For 18 years, Loni Coonbs worked as a criminal trial attorney, prosecuting over 50 cases, ranging from murders and gang cases to sex crimes and DUIs. She's also a veteran legal commentator appearing on CNN, Investigation Discovery, Oxygen, Today, The View, and Dr. Phil, and is the author of You're Perfect and Other Lies Parents Tell, and The Ugly Truth About Spoiling Your Kids. 2 books I need to read to make sure my kids don't get spoiled. The woman in white, Amy Lawrence Lovely, fights for the civil rights of the wrongfully accused every day in her practice. Amy handles civil rights, police brutality and misconduct, and the criminal defense docket at the Lovely Law Firm. She was also on MTV's Teen Mom 2 and has appeared on the Dr. Phil Show. And then Sarah Ford. She has served as legal director at the South Carolina Victim Assistance Network since 2017, where she leads a team of attorneys and advocates to provide legal services to South Carolina crime victims, and is a former South Carolina prosecutor. Quick notes, please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We are at Podcast STS. Please support me and my lovely mother at Patreon. You can also get a YouTube membership, and you can subscribe on there and hit the like button. As my 7 and 8-year-old daughters say, it gets the algorithm chugging. So without further ado, let's hop into it with a big picture question, mainly because this is the thumbnail that I chose for this episode, questioning, is it an indefensible alibi that the defense has to work around here by the mere fact that these videos, or at least that one video, shows Alec basically at the scene of the murders just minutes before the state says that the double murder happened. Sarah, you're not new to the show, but new to this gang. What are your thoughts? An indefensible alibi right now?
I don't think there's ever an totally indefensible alibi, but I think it causes a lot of problems for Dick and Jim when they try to tackle this, maybe even tomorrow once they start. Someone can be a liar. That doesn't mean they're a murderer, but it also, it just doesn't pass the smell test. What he said and what has been able to be shown through some of the evidence that the state's presented so far, it just doesn't jive. So not indefensible, but tricky for sure.
Amy, how do you approach this if you're Dick Harpootlian, which thank God you're not, but how do you handle it?
Way prettier. I think I would have done everything different if I'd been Dick and Jim. Wouldn't have kicked that door open to character evidence. I can tell you that. I think you don't address it almost. Do you know what I mean? You just keep poking holes in everything that they say, right? And I think that he's given breath and life to this prosecution of, because you steal money, you kill your family, right? If I were cross-examining all these witnesses, I would get up and I would say, show me the murder weapon. All these guns are open evidence are not the murder weapon. Okay. All right, Mr. Tinsley, do you have any direct knowledge of the murder of Maggie and Paul? No? Okay, thank you so much. Like that, I would just leave it at that, because by asking all these stupid questions, one, we obviously know they're kicking doors open left and right, especially after today. And then it's giving it life. Like, just because you are a liar and a thief, you're a murderer, right? So, like, why not just go with, like, I didn't understand this whole cross-examination of the pathologist today, right? It just didn't make any, like everybody's like, what? Like you just wasted an hour of my life, I'm never going to get back. I feel like that a lot about this trial. But like, I'm just waiting. I don't think, I think you just keep poking holes in it and you move past it, because people in the middle of trauma respond in different ways, right? And we know, I mean, I went back and watched that second interview of him, and he's like, I was at the kennels earlier. And even in that first, I'd been of course I was probably at the kennels. I was at the kennels all the time. That's what we did. And I think you go into, that's just what trauma is, right? In the midst of like this crazy tragedy, just watching my kid's head blown off against the kennels, I wasn't thinking, right? I was trying to process. I was trying to put my whole day together. Everything went to shit. And I was just in the middle of a tragedy, because that I can wrap my mind around.
Amy, just to your point about kicking the door open to witness testimony on Tuesday, because this will come out Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
What specifically did the defense screw up? What did they open the can of worms? What kind of can of worms did they open up?
So we watched the prosecution call Maggie's sister, right? And she looked just like her. I mean, it was uncanny. Yeah. It broke my heart. It was a piece of me that like I got all but clamped. You know what I mean? I like found myself tearing up about it. And on cross, Jim started asking questions about, I'm trying to figure out, Loni, do you remember exactly how he said it? It was like, what did he say? It opened up the door to the drug abuse and possibly this affair that he possibly could have had 15 years ago. And it opened up a whole can of worms. Now the affair stuff did not come in. And by her own account, when they were doing an in-camera testimony to see if it would come in, she said that it was unsubstantiated, that it was something that didn't feel right. And she had reached out to this woman's husband, and he said, no, it wasn't. I had a PI following her. She was having an affair, but it wasn't with your husband. But like all that started coming in, and that's just unnecessary and insane.
So we're going to get deeper into Maggie's sister testifying on Tuesday. But Loni, just to give you a chance about this thumbnail, about the alibi being indefensible, just the, what we're calling the dogtail video, where you hear his voice, and it was corroborated again by a person that worked at the kennels today that it was in fact his voice. I mean, if I'm a juror, because I'm doing it as a reporter, as a host of this podcast, I'm really gravitating to that. It's hard to make sense of the fact that he wasn't there. He had to be there, I feel like. But how do you get around that? And is it indefensible?
I do think that this is one of, if not the biggest piece of evidence that the prosecution has right now, to place him there at the crime scene within minutes of them being killed. They have a really tight time frame based on their theory of the phone data, saying that the killings happened about 4 minutes after this recording was made. And I was talking to Vinnie Politan yesterday about this, and he just boils it down to this. He goes, this is the case. 3 people were at the kennels, 2 people died, and 1 person lied about it. So it isn't just a lie. Yeah, people lie all the time, doesn't mean you're a murderer. But this lie happens to be about that I wasn't there at the time that the murders happened. And because they've had everybody that takes a stand, whether it be, Paul's friends who called Alex like their second father, or Paul, Alex's, law firm partners, or his best friend, or the family members, they've all been asked, is that Alex Murdaugh's, voice? And they're all agreeing to it. So I think that everybody's going to kind of agree that, yeah, he's there on the video. And I think that the defense is going to have to deal with, trying to change that time frame of when they actually died, to push it out further, to give Alex some time to get away. This may be where, a 2-shooter theory comes up. I don't know, but I do think that the defense needs to address this. And in fact, I think one of the reasons, if Alex takes the stand, it will be to look the jurors in the eyes and explain to them, kind of like what Amy said, look, I was in shock. That's why I didn't, I got it all messed up in my head, whatever. I wasn't really lying. I just, messed up. Yes, I was at the kennels,
Do y'all think, Sarah, Loni, do you think that he will testify?
I hope not, for his sake. I mean, the only person that can screw this up is him.
Right. But I mean, it's always a bad idea, right? But he's such a narcissist, and he believes that he controls this county, this jury, that they will do whatever he says, because apparently that was his magic gift, is that he could get everybody to believe him, and he could, sell himself to whomever, whatever, and they would always think he was the best guy and that he was going to help them out. And so I think he wants to sit there in front of that jury and just tell his story, and that they're all going to love him. And that's going to, and I think what he'll do is say, look, I did the financial crimes. It was terrible. It was horrible. For whatever reason I did that, and I'm sorry. But I would never, ever blow my son's brains out so that, as I always say, it hit the roof and landed by all of that. I would never do that, because I am the best father and husband, etc. And, jurors like that. Juries like, the partial admission. Yes, I did this, but I would never cross that line. And that's the big question, I think, with bringing in the financial crimes. I think the jury is saying, okay, financial crimes versus murder. And if he gets up and admits to part and says, no, I didn't do the other, I don't know. I think he'll want to. So
juries want to hear from the defendant too. They just want to. They want to know.
Sarah, you sound like a defense attorney, even though you really are more of a prosecutor type.
I've done both.
Yeah, but it's interesting. We had a young defense attorney on last night, and he says, the cardinal rule is never to put the defendant up there. But he says in more cases than not, when he had the defendant take the stand, he won those cases. So is it like a calculated gamble? Is it something, because some people are saying he sort of has to get up there and explain away the timeline?
I think it's a kind of a game day decision. It's not something that you can decide we're going to do this or we're not. You have to be flexible about it. And ultimately the decision is Alex Murdaugh's, whether he wants to testify or not. I do think that juries want to hear from the defendant, and whether they're instructed by the judge, you can't take that into consideration, whether he testifies or not. People naturally, well, if you didn't have anything to hide, then why wouldn't you come and tell your story? So I think that for him, can his lawyers control him enough and help to control this narrative enough that's going to make it effective? I don't think they're going to be able to do that. And I think the cross-examination will be insane. But I also think maybe it's a defense strategy to put it out there at this point. Yeah, we're going to put him on the stand just to mess with the heads of the prosecutors. I mean, that's what I would do if I were
totally fucking with their heads, and then they're going to pull back because they're going to spend 3 days preparing for it. I mean, my last murder case, I had multiple files with this one witness's name on it with like big labels on the side. I never called her. I had no intention of calling her. They thought I was, and I made it out. They thought I was going to make the whole trial about this one witness and this one thing. And when I didn't, they were left, well, they lost, but whatever.
But so like, Amy, you think it's just a ploy, but you don't think they're going to go through with it, is what you're saying?
I think there's a good chance. What were you saying, Loni, though?
Oh, I was going to say, when I saw that leak, I texted Amy and I said, as soon as it leaked, I thought there's less chance he's going to take the stand now. I think that Dick and Jim are just playing with the prosecution's head. I believed it more before that leak.
Well, Dick Harpootlian in his prime was known, and it wouldn't, he says it, he's fucking with him, right? Totally. Like, he gets up into their space. He has like a whole like method of how he does it. And he's always been very good at it. I'm not seeing it in this trial, which is crazy because I just, like Amy Z and I were talking, and Sarah, which is an associate attorney in our firm, who we are all very, very close and love each other. Like, if it were, because these are best friends. Isn't that what you get out of that? Like, they're all going on vacations together and stuff. And I couldn't imagine if it were Amy Z's life up there, or Sarah's, or somebody that I know and love, I would be like putting like the A game of all A games on, but I'm not seeing it.
But couldn't that be a setup though, Amy? Like, come on, this is Dick Harpootlian, whose reputation, I mean, certainly he'll tell you about his reputation, right?
Yeah, but sorry. I mean, I'm not trying to be ugly, but like,
well, yeah, but I mean, part of it makes me think, are they just setting this up for PCR at the end?
I thought that too.
I mean, post-conviction relief, where it's like, hey, ineffective assistance of counsel. Like, it could be.
Just keep kicking those doors open. Amy Z and I are like texting each other memes of people just kicking doors open left and right.
I've seen plenty of those on Twitter. It's kind of crazy, but speaking about kind of the incestuous nature of all this, and we'll get again further into it in a minute, but today, the defense, Jim Griffin, basically said that he had it on the witness stand, right, and said that they found out about the financial crimes through him. That's how Maggie's sister found out, and he had to say it was hearsay, even though he was the one providing the information. I mean, Loni, have you ever seen anything like that in a courtroom where he was crying hearsay about himself?
No. Honestly, as soon as I heard him doing the cross-examination of Maggie's sister, I mean, apparently they are like very close family friends. Like he knows Maggie's sister and the husband, and that he would choose to do the cross-examination of her when it's clear that she has had changed feelings about Alex. This is all about prosecuting the killer of her sister. And he gets up there and the first thing he says is, "This is hard for me too." Like we're supposed to feel sorry for the defense attorney. And then he gets to the point where, yes, it's coming into the fact that he was telling her things while this was all going on. I thought this was so inappropriate, so unethical, and really just as a human being to another human being who's having to do probably the hardest thing she's done, because we haven't heard anything from Maggie's family. They're not in the courtroom. They haven't talked about this. This is the first time she's talking about it publicly. And for him to choose to be the one, they've got a whole rack of attorneys. He chooses to be the one, I don't know, to throw her off or to think that he can kind of get her to go along with what he says. I just really thought that was a really low blow for him to be doing that.
Sarah Ford, how is this even allowed? I mean, it seems like such an obvious conflict of interest. What's going on in South Carolina?
Well, South Carolina, we're a bunch of oddballs for the most part, and we're cool with it. But I'll tell you, I have not been pleased with the way I've seen some of these attorneys handle themselves, because it just doesn't speak well of our legal community. And I think we have a fantastic bar here in South Carolina. We really do. But it was mind-blowing to me this afternoon when she says, "Well, I talked to you, Jim." And it's like, wait, that Jim? Like this Jim that's questioning you. And to Loni's point where it's like, this is hard for me too. When he starts off, it's like, if you have that kind of relationship with a witness, you don't question that witness. You just don't. And putting himself in the middle, I think even Judge Newman was like, "Well, what's going on here? What are you doing here? Like, what is the story?" So I thought that was not, I mean, maybe it was well thought out. I mean, I don't think that was a good idea. I don't think I would have done that. But
what did Judge Newman say? He said, "It looks like you just made yourself a witness in your case," which is like
the cardinal rule number one. Like, come on.
Have you ever heard a judge say that, Amy? You just made yourself a witness in your own trial?
Nope.
That was silence, ladies and gentlemen. How about the fact? I'm sorry, Loni, go ahead.
Crazy stuff, but
It's like lawyering 101. They teach you that in the first year of law school. Don't make yourself, don't allow yourself to become a witness in your own case. So it's like these attorneys have been doing this forever. They know not to do this.
But they've always just kind of like got away with it and done whatever they kind of want, and everybody kind of rolled with it, and no judges ever said anything. So like, what's the big deal, right? Again, it's going in with the confidence of mediocre white men.
And that's before half the country and a quarter of the world was watching the trial that they're partaking in. But Amy, they are testing for COVID Wednesday. What are you going to do if a couple more jurors get sick with COVID and there's a mistrial? Will you pull your hair out?
I don't want to do this again. But can I tell you something? I think the best thing is that here is Creighton and Dick Harpoolian agreeing that we should continue it, right? Which means that nobody feels like they have any momentum going and nobody's doing great, right? So, I love Judge Newman, like, "Oh, no. My ass ain't saying in Colleton County one more day than I have to. We're not continuing it. We're just going to see how it goes," right? So I think they have 3 more alternates, right? 3.
Nice.
We're down 3 and they had 6 alternates. So we have 3 more alternates. I pray that nobody else gets COVID. I mean, I tried the first murder case and the first General Sessions case in the middle of COVID in 2020, and it was insane. And I got COVID when all said that. And I got COVID again when after I tried those back-to-back civil 1983 actions in Columbia for a month. It was crazy. I kept looking at the judge going, "Allergies my ass." You know what I mean?
And we had Gigi McKelvey on from the Pretty Lies and Alibis podcast, and she's been in the courtroom every day. And she was saying that there has been a female juror that was kind of nodding off, and then after this COVID testing. She was one of the ones that were removed, and she was wondering now maybe, because I had it one time, and it does
right?
make you exhausted. But there was kind of a collective gasp in the courtroom yesterday when everyone found out that there could be this reality of people getting sick with COVID. But hopefully that doesn't happen. Speaking a little bit more about what took place on Tuesday, jurors got some more testimony, graphic testimony about the way Maggie and Paul were shot and killed. Sarah, how tough is it for jurors to see this stuff, and how carefully do you have to kind of be when you are lawyering and dealing with jurors with this incredibly sensitive and disturbing material?
Well, jurors didn't ask to be there. We've called them in. We said you're going to be on this jury for 3 weeks, and so far we've lied. Now it's 4 weeks, going into 5. It is incredibly difficult to see these pictures. You can't unsee this stuff. You just can't. And I don't think we give enough credit to our jurors who are forcing this on. But certainly we appreciate their service. But I think that you have to be very mindful as a prosecutor of just how much you're pushing in their face, because there's a piece of it that they have to see to be able to understand what's going on. But then there becomes that line where it's just overkill, and there's no reason for the graphic nature of that. Seeing some of the pictures and things that have been released, and video of Maggie and Paul's bodies being blurred. I'm a victims' rights lawyer. I don't think that's necessary for everybody to see that. I really don't. So I think that you've really got to be mindful of just putting in enough, not too much, because then you may just at that point strike away all the goodwill that you've been working towards with that jury. When it may count.
And the irony is that Alex Murdaugh's not looking at any of it. He's got his monitor covered, but the jury is forced to see it. And it's got to be super disturbing. Amy, back to you for a minute. So the great Amy, A-I-M-E-E, not to be confused with A-M-Y, who I'm talking to, was supposed to be on this episode, but she had to bail last minute and told me it was a different trial. But her client happens to be Curtis' cousin, Eddie Smith. What do you know about this? Is this guy going to testify? She said he was supposed to, but now we're basically at the end of the state's case. So what's happening as far as you know?
She has not gotten word yet, which is crazy, right?
Hmm.
And I mean, that's the honest God truth. If it's going to go down tomorrow, right? But they have not given her the word. Everybody, she's like, if I had a nickel for every time somebody asked me if he's going to testify, look, I'd be a millionaire at this point. I wish I knew. The thing is with Eddie is he's a double-edged sword for the prosecution and the defense. I think the defense will try to call him if the state does not. But I'm not sure Newman would grant him, like, I don't think Newman would necessarily give them hostile witness testimony from him. Do you know what I mean? Be able to treat him as a hostile witness. I don't think they would. He's way too amicable about telling a story. You know what I mean? So I don't know. If it were a police officer or something, yes. But in this situation, I'm not sure he would give it. And the way Alex Murdaugh's defense is going, it goes probably a not, right? Because they're not really rolling down when it comes to any of their objections or trying to keep any evidence out. It's not really working. So I don't know. We'll know tomorrow.
And Loni, what do you think the defense would hope to accomplish? I mean, I'm sorry, the state by putting him on the stand. What was the main purpose?
I think there's 2 areas, and there might be more, but the 2 areas that I could see is one, that Alex Murdaugh had like 10 bank accounts in various forms of Curtis Smith's name. Now, it's interesting that when the forensic accounting guy testified today, it was the defense who brought up the fact that out of the $792,000 missing fees, that he traced it all down, and apparently $500,000 of that, $500,000 of that was put into Curtis Smith's accounts by Alex Murdaugh. So they got that in. And then the other part is, the whole roadside shooting thing. And apparently Curtis Smith, has talked about that and given like 6 different versions. We have Alex's version that, what he says first is that, somebody tried to kill him and, shoot him in the head. And then the second version was, this was all an insurance fraud thing. So I'm not sure if the defense wants to get that in, I think the state wants to get it in for whatever reason. But right now, that's exactly what they ended on today in court, is arguing if there is any legal reason to let that in. Every time the judge asked the prosecutor for the legal reason, he would go on and say, essentially, well, this is showing a pattern that, the first time Alec killed was to make it, a delay and a distraction and sympathy for him because there was this wild killer out there. And so the second time he was trying to be a victim, so it looked like that killer was still out there, making this pattern. But, they keep arguing it as motive. You can't show motive after the killings that you're being prosecuted for right then. So right now the legal grounds are murky. I'm not sure the prosecution again has their legal theory clear. They're not presenting to the judge in a clear way. Because of that, it might not come in, and there might not be
or the jury. They're also not conveying it to the jury.
Exactly. I mean, the jury is in such, I think, a confused state right now as to really what the prosecution's theory is. And I see the prosecution's theory changing as they go along, when we can tell that based on what is being argued outside of the jury. Things keep changing. I'm like, come on, you guys, the case is almost over. When are you going to hit on the theory that you're going to argue to the jury at the end of the case? So they need to really, get focused on this.
And I heard a legal expert today on one of the networks saying that he can't recall a case this far along where he just can't figure out which way the jury is going to go. Usually there's a predictive factor, and here it's just so up in the air. But Sarah, to you, what did you make of all this testimony from the forensic pathologist? Because it did get, pretty gnarly. We learned about Paul getting shot once, and it wasn't a kill shot, and then the second shot brought him down and ejected his brain basically from his body. But again, how impactful is this testimony, and in what way, I guess?
Well, I think it's impactful because, to have someone, I mean, I thought she was a great witness. I really did. I thought that she was a powerhouse. And this morning when she was just, right back at Dick Harpootlian, I don't really know much about, pathology, and then is coming up with all these things. She's like, actually, no. I love that. I think it's important because people want to understand, how this person was killed, how Paul and Maggie were killed, the manner of that. And that's her area of expertise. But I think the defense went on way, way, way too long with that. I think everybody agrees that it's a homicide here. It's just the defense says it wasn't Alex. And I thought that they wasted a lot of time. I thought they wasted a lot of energy. I think that the antagonism that I continue to see between some of the defense and some of the witnesses. Nobody's winning likability points here. And sometimes it comes down to likability. Who do I trust more? Who do I like more? Who do I trust to, that I might not remember that specific detail, but, I think that, that this lawyer has been telling us the truth. I think that, they gave up a lot of points with that in that particular area today.
I'm not a young woman, but if I was, I don't know how much I would love Dick Harpootlian. He's definitely just being an observer. To your point, he's not being maybe as subtle as he needs to be at certain times. Now, Loni, I read way too much about this. I should have gone to law school, would have helped, but it's a little late now.
It's never too late.
Don't do it, girl. Don't do it.
There's a theory being floated out there that now the defense, when they get the case next week, that they're going to espouse some sort of murder-suicide theory, that Paul shot Maggie and then killed himself. What do you make of that? Is there any chance that the defense would go down that road now, and that's why they're being so tough on this forensic pathologist and trying to talk about the angle the shots came in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, that's one of the interpretations you can take away from the very confusing defense cross-examination today, because the shot that the medical examiner is saying, the second shot, the kill shot on Paul that went through the shoulder and then through the neck and blew off the back of his head, they were trying to reverse the shot saying it went into his head first as a contact wound going out the other way. And she was so good because Dick is so used to just keeping asking and asking until finally the witness kind of goes, well, yeah, you could be right. She said, finally, she goes, yeah, people could disagree with me, but that doesn't change the truth. I thought, oh my goodness, the prosecution needs to be saying that in their closing argument over and over again. So I think they're trying to play up. And remember, law enforcement said when they first got there that night, they thought maybe this was a murder-suicide, and they went over to Paul's body, remember, and tried to lift it up to see if there was a gun underneath him, because obviously if he commits suicide, that gun has to be somewhere. So if it is a suicide, as Amy was showing, it seems like it's going to be hard to say that he used the shotgun on himself from that angle, and also then where are the guns, right? Because it's not like the gun can then disappear if he has killed his mother and then commits suicide.
So I do my homework, although not being an attorney. And Dr. Reimer says, and I quote here, they're going back and forth, her and Dick Harpootlian, and she says, a contact gunshot wound to the top of the head like that, like I told you, it would have caused fragmentation of the brain, not ejection of the brain. It would have never just left the rest of the skull intact. I don't believe the fractions of his skull are consistent with that being a contact shotgun wound. And then went on to tell Harpootlian that she's done 5,500 autopsies. Amy, that's sort of a mic drop moment in the court because, as you guys have said, Harpootlian is used to getting the answers he wants. And she basically said, what you're suggesting is 100% wrong. I'm right. I'm the expert. Go women.
Yeah, I thought you led with, I don't really know anything about pathology. Can you help walk me through this? And if I get it wrong, like it's like patronizing. Also, I think this is like, okay, first of all, we've already said this, like we've got a bunch of like mediocre white dudes up here trying these cases. We've got one prosecutor who's doing a great little job. She's a brand new baby lawyer. But Dick has a pretty seasoned who's writing these motions, and they are like the bomb for him, who is an attorney at his firm, and she's not doing it. I mean, like they are missing this opportunity to put her up there and do a lot of this cross, and they're not using her at all. And it just makes me so mad because she could be doing 100 times better. And I mean, she just could. I don't even know her, but I know she
I keep thinking how much different this trial would be if they had more women at the table.
Oh, I've already said only women should be doing this, right? Because if Dick wants to go with the theory, because I think this is the best theory, is you don't fucking kill your kid. And when you do, when we see people who kill their kids, they smother them, they shoot them from a distance, like, you know what I mean? It's not up close and personal. And so if he was going to cross-examine that pathologist, all he needed to do was say, this was a really horrific murder, wasn't it? It was almost an execution. And Paul and Maggie knew who killed him. They saw it coming. And that murderer looked them in the face while they did it. Isn't that right? Circled them and blew their brains out. Okay, thank you. Because your dad doesn't do that to you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. If that's going to be their argument, keep the theme and roll with it, because that makes sense. And I think that's the part that holds everybody back. It's the part that holds me back. You know what I mean? And it might be that I live in La La Land, who, and I don't want to believe that this happens, you know what I mean? Especially with people that I know, or at least know from a distance, you know what I mean? People who are like me, like a lawyer, that we just can't wrap our mind around that. And I think that's what the only thing that's going to hold them to get that hung jury, because they don't think they're going to get a not guilty. If they do, it will be based off the DNA, right? Because, I mean, we learned from the DNA, which I find it really funny that StarMix technology, like in DNA testing, when I have in cases, Slick gets up there and they explain it really like easily to understand. But the SLED agent that gets up there explains the StarMix DNA testing. I mean, I was going cross-eyed and I know all about it, right? I was like, as a matter of fact, I printed out the report because I was like just trying to make heads or tails of it to make sense to me, and I know all about it. And she was confusing me, and I think that was intentional, right? I think that was intentional. But so I think they should say his DNA is exactly where it's supposed to be, right? And Maggie's DNA is exactly where it's supposed to be. But Alex's DNA is nowhere else. But we do know that it's a bunch of unidentified individuals, unknown. Who is that guy? Probably the guy who has the cell phone.
Yeah. Underneath Maggie's fingernails. I mean, that to me, oh my goodness. Defense should be all over that.
All over it.
So, Loni,
But y'all, come on. I mean, we know that anybody's DNA could be anywhere. I mean, if you go get your nails done, I keep seeing that. I mean, Amy, I might have seen you somewhere and touched your shirt, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, Sarah Ford's DNA is on Amy's shirt." Oh my God! Like, I think that we use DNA like we think it's going to be this definitive thing that's like, haha. And none of this evidence is ever going to be definitive. It can't ever tell us, or very rarely will tell us.
That's what we know about juries. That gives them it is definitive for them, right? That's the black and white that they need. It's like, I wouldn't feel comfortable convicting somebody when there is unidentified, unknown DNA of someone, and I'm going to go with a man because I don't think a woman would kill anybody like this, a man that we don't know who it is. And we also know that at the time Alec is driving to his mother's, Maggie's phone's getting slung out of a car in the opposite direction, a mile and a half up the road, right? That needs to be the theme. And you don't kill your kid.
I agree. I think it's a very simple piece of evidence that jurors can really understand and want to accept. And that is the unknown killer, male killer's DNA is under her fingernails.
Loni, today they called Roger Davis. He worked for the Murdaughs at the kennels, and I thought he was an interesting witness. But because he was talking about the day of the murders and what was going on, I went back and rewatched, because I'm a nerd, the YouTube video of the first deputy arriving on scene. And I got to tell you, I don't know how to say this subtly. It looked like Alex Murdaugh was acting to me. Have you watched that recently? And he also goes right into how there was this boat accident and people were threatening my son. And to me, it just smells really bad. Have you watched it recently?
Yeah, you're talking about the video where it's the body cam of the
body
first
cam.
So there's Alec and he's walking around, and I think the bodies are like right there. I can't tell because they fuzz them out and it's dark, but I was just like my skin was crawling because he was talking about, the boat accident and this is why it happened and what he had done. And honestly, if that was my, son and my spouse there, just horrific, bloody crime scene, I would be bawling and crying. I don't know if I could be standing. I was surprised at how he was just so sort of methodical about it. I didn't think it really rang true at all on that video.
And Sarah, again, he brings up the pulse. Did you check the pulse? I think he says it twice. And if he did in fact commit these crimes, that's a sick person right there.
No doubt. I think it doesn't make sense, at least from what we've seen so far, that he would have checked the pulse and seen all it, but then he was as clean as he was. But I think it also goes to the fact where, cardinal rule, when I was a baby public defender, I would tell my clients when I met with them, they'd say, I mean, come on, Miss Ford, why would I do that? And I'm like, no, stop. Don't ever say that, because that makes it look like you just did it. So just don't ever go there. So I think when people kind of come up with that backstory, like, let me tell you all these things, like, let me explain away. It's like, it always makes me, as, been doing this for, coming up on 20 years, like, let me back away because this is not good. So I totally agree with you, Loni, about that it doesn't pass the smell test. It really doesn't.
And so this guy, Roger Davis, to me was straight out of Central Casting. He didn't give a crap that he was testifying, came in his work clothes, basically. He's a Hampton native.
I love that, though.
Yeah, I loved it, too. And he basically was testifying about taking care. He was hired by the Murdaughs to essentially clean the kennels twice a day. But to me, it's always things that are really, really subtle and small that can be big. And so he was asked and responds about the hose that he would use to wash the dogs, and said, somebody used that hose after I did because it's twisted. Now, I can relate. I've got some OCD issues. I'm not going to lie. And this guy obviously, rolled that hose up very properly and noticed that the hose was untangled. Amy Lawrence Lovely, is it possible Alex Murdaugh used that hose to wash himself off after these crimes? And suddenly the jurors are sitting there going, Roger Davis is telling me something really interesting, because I never heard about a hose being moved before. Or am I making too big a deal of it?
Well, this is my thing. Okay, so I'm driving back from court and I'm trying to like replay little pieces of stuff so I can listen to it. And so, did he talk about what time he left that day?
I think he did say he left. I want to say around 4:30.
Okay, 4:30. We know that they were down there feeding the dog and checking on the dogs. I mean, that's not a big stretch that you would put more water in a dog's bowl. And we knew that they left their pots and pans out on the, like, you know what I mean? Like, they left everything kind of in a mess for somebody else to clean up the next day. Like, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, right? In my head, anyway. But I liked him. I liked him a lot. You know what I mean? Just like, I don't know, he seemed like real. Like, he was not living in this like fantasy world of like the lap of luxury, which is always good.
Yeah, and he went on to testify that the Murdaughs owned many guns, which we knew, and he said that Paul's favorite gun was a Black 300 blackout rifle, which goes to some of the ballistics found on scene. And then was asked about the relationship with his wife. And Loni, here he says that he never once heard Alec raise his voice when talking to his wife, Maggie, and also said that Alec and Paul enjoyed hunting, fishing, and drinking beer together. So, contrary to my point about the hose, our jurors now saying, wow, he's a family man. He never raised his voice. I can tell you, by the way, my mother has been married to my dad for 61 years, and there's never been a day where she has not raised his voice. And he taught me very early on, you let it go through one ear and out the other, which is what I do. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I think that this witness was, he had a lot of stuff to say, actually. And I did love him, like Amy said, because he was so detailed about his work. You believed everything he said. It wasn't like he was not sure about how he did that hose. He did that hose the exact same way every day. He did the water exact same way every day. And the way the prosecution laid this out, it was like, oh my goodness, yeah, this hose has been moved. This must be going to Alex doing this after the cleanup. But then the defense got up in cross-examination, showed the dog kennel video, which we've all seen, where they're all three there, and said, isn't there water right there on the floor already? And isn't the hose already moved? So just like you said, Amy, it was, it could very easily have been done by the three of them when they were down there by the kennel. So again, it makes it look like the prosecution might be sort of overreaching, trying to make this
trying to get that W, right?
Try and make it look one way when it can just as easily look the other way. And the defense is like, look, it's right there on the video. As far as the family man, we have heard this over and over and over again, that they didn't fight. But we're also hearing little things that perhaps if you've been in a relationship like this, you know, a relationship like this, you know that just because they don't fight doesn't mean it's a great relationship. And we heard something outside the jury today where her sister said, she goes, she was happy, so I was fine with that. And then you find out that, Maggie thought that he had an affair 15 years ago. And even though she felt like they'd resolved it, she still brought it up to her sister. So it's kind of like the sister's like, okay, if you're happy with it, fine, you stay in it, but I don't necessarily think it's the greatest relationship. And maybe Maggie just kind of like, resolved herself to it because that's who he was. She liked the lifestyle. She liked their family, and it was kind of like whatever it is. So yes, we're hearing a lot about him being a family man. And that's why they keep opening the door to the character stuff, which is when the prosecution keeps jumping in with other stuff. But we hear it over and over again.
And that's an interesting point, Loni, because they do say that the opposite of love is not hate, but apathy. So maybe the fact that they are not arguing, maybe Alec just checked out of the marriage, but who knows? Amy, you had a point.
I think we all know couples like this, right? And I don't necessarily have friends like this because I don't have time for bullshit. Like I like real authentic, right? I want to know all the messy. I'm messy, right? I'm big emotions, big feelings about everything. When my husband and I fight, it's like I'm clearing a desk in moments. You know what I mean? But those moments are few and far between, right? But like my mom has friends, and I call them country club friends, right? And we all have friends like that, or our parents do anyway. And on the outside, everything looks perfect. But behind closed doors, we don't really know what happened. I think that we really realized we don't really know what was going on. I think after the sister's testimony, and I don't think she really understood what was going on. I mean, marriages are messy and hard and stuff, but like when everybody's trying to sell this like perfection, it feels inauthentic. You know what I mean? Because I'm the first one to tell you, I make a joke all the time. I'd kill Justin, but like I can't get my hands around his fat neck. But it's a joke, but like, that's life, that's marriage, and that's okay. Right. But when you're trying to sell this thing that it's not, it just doesn't feel right.
Hey, Mr. Lovely, call me. I'll help you. So there was one other piece of information here. Mr. Davis is asked about a time that a dog got caught in the fence at the kennels and was so badly injured he had to be put down, which, by the way, this is, I guess, a very South Carolina thing.
Yeller.
Yeah. So they said that Alec couldn't get himself to put the dog down, so Davis had to shoot the dog. Don't you guys have veterinarians in South Carolina? Who's shooting a dog in the head? What's going on here?
But you don't want to have to drive the dog into town. I mean, that's a ways. I mean,
Oh my
Cost
goodness.
$500 to get a dog put down. Come on.
I know.
Mabel Rose is no longer here to hear this.
No, but I think this does give credence to what I said before. If we're to believe that this, like, he was going to like stage the suicide. Okay, all lawyers know, and Sarah, I'm not losing my mind. And Loni, I don't know if they teach you this in law school, but like there's some cases or something. But we all kind of know that like after 2 years of life insurance vests, and you can kill yourself, right? Do we all know this? The majority of lawyers know this. So the idea that he is trying to get his buddy, it's because he's a big old pussy who can't even kill himself. What makes you think he like looked at his wife and his kids, circled them and shot them multiple times and blew their brains out? Like, I think that kind of gives credence to that whole thing. Like, he couldn't even kill himself.
100%.
Or a dog.
But I think if we're looking at people thinking, oh, they could never do this, or every day we are faced with the facts that people kill their loved ones, their children, their spouses, their strangers. It happens every day. And I think that's what we want to rationalize in our heads. Like, how could somebody do this? And the point of this entire, what we're seeing here is you cannot rationalize the irrational. If you're looking at this through rational lenses and thinking, how can I put my feels, my emotions on this? You can't. And, I think we're never going to be able to figure out, like, how could this person do this? I could never do this. Well, it doesn't matter if you could do it. It's about what this person did.
And there have been a lot of men who have snapped under intense financial pressure too, which he was definitely facing. So Marianne Proctor, this is Maggie Murdaugh's sister, and she was called today at 2:40 p.m., I should say, on Tuesday, for those listening Wednesday. And it was really heartfelt. Basically, she says that Paul was misrepresented in the media, says that money was never an issue for her sister, Maggie, until that bounce check that we've heard about. And then it gets kind of interesting. Well, she also says that Paul was being mistreated, especially by the media post-boat accident. And then was asked... Then testified that she asked Alec if he thought Maggie had suffered, and he says no. And she also asked him if Paul had suffered, and he said no. And then on the stand, she says she doesn't know if that's true now. Loni, to you, how effective was her testimony, in your opinion, for the state's case?
I thought she was a very good witness. And I think she was right down the line. I don't think she was trying to help one side or the other. She was just telling what she knew. And you can tell that her feelings about Alex are very complicated. And she said about that, she asked, did Maggie suffer? And he said, no, but I think whoever did this had been planning it for a while.
Weird.
That's a strange thing. And then he said the same thing about Paul. And then she kind of said, and I wish, I miss this a lot, but I wish the prosecutor would let these witnesses testify. He always does leading questions. And she was giving really good stuff if they would just let her talk, because when they let her talk, that's when she said, he said this, that she didn't suffer. And she goes, I just don't know if I believe that anymore. That just kind of came out when she was allowed to talk. And then she, it became more about how, as time went on, she, came to September where she didn't believe what he was saying at all anymore. I thought she was a very good witness. And it was so uncomfortable when Jim's out talking to her, like, they're buddies at the country club together, and going through this. And she, she agreed with him on stuff that he was asking her, but she would also hold firm on certain things. And at one point when he was asking about, she started to say my feelings changed, and then she started to go on, and that's where the friendship kind of switched for him, because it's like any other witness, he would have just like run right over him and cut him off, but he had to kind of like pull back because she was still sort of rambling on and giving really good information, and he kind of pulled his punch, and that's when we kind of opened the door again to more things that the prosecution, argue they can, start talking about the roadside and everything that happened in September now. So I thought she was a great witness and very very emotional because this is the first time we've really heard anybody talk about and testify for Maggie.
And Amy, what did you make of that comment? The direct quote is, whoever had done it had thought about it for a really long time. What did you make of that?
What the fuck does that mean? Right? That sounds creepy as hell. And that what y'all thought? That sounds creepy as hell. Like, that don't make any sense to me. You know, but then again, like, I keep thinking it from like through the lens of a lawyer. Like, we've seen some really horrible stuff, right? Whether it's a decapitated person from a trucking accident, or, you know, a throat slit in a bedroom in a murder case. We've seen all this kind of crazy stuff. And so, like, you kind of like try to put on your lawyer hat in the midst of things to like try to make sense of it. And I mean, is that him like trying to like figure it out? Like, how does this happen? Like, is it because of all the you know, the conversation he's had with police up until this point and what they've said? I don't know. But all I know is it comes on creepy as hell, and I don't like it. But I really like her because you can tell, just like Miss Shelley, right? Because she's my favorite witness, that she's still torn too because she doesn't know either. Because she loves Alec, right? Loved Alec practically her whole life. And that makes it really hard to like, and she loves her sister and she loves Paul. And the idea that he could do that, she's really, really struggling with it. And I think that's real life, right?
Yeah.
That's authentic.
And I don't think there's any doubt that he was and still is and can be a charming guy, but so can OJ Simpson, you know? So I do think people are struggling in a real way with trying to like make sense, as you guys were saying, of how someone could do this if in fact he is the killer. But Marianne Proctor, the sister, continued on and told Alec, according to her, told Marianne the number one goal was clearing Paul's name. Marianne said it struck her as odd because her main concern was finding out who had killed her sister. Sarah, that's kind of like a oh crap moment.
Red flag.
Yeah. So what did you think when you heard that?
You know, I think, to me, listening to her testify, I thought she did a really, really good job. But I think that when she was testifying, it was almost like it was like some sort of cathartic moment where she's testifying. And then you could see that she's qualifying a lot of what she's saying, like, and that was odd, or that didn't make sense. You know, she's trying to, and it's like it was happening while she was on the stand. And I think for her, testifying to that, thinking, what the hell? Like, at that point, you're worried about like the boat crash, like your son and your wife had been brutally murdered at their home, and that you're worried about the boat crash. Like, come on. And I think that she tried to maybe qualify it towards the end, like, well, you know, I think that it was important to him because of all the things that Paul had been through and all of that. But I can't relate to that at all. I can't relate to thinking it's more important to clear my dead son's name than find his killer. That seems completely bonkers to me. And you know,
it makes next to no sense. And then there was an other interesting part of the testimony with Marianne, where she says that the family, meaning her family, thought the murders were because of this boat accident, but then her mind changed in September. She went on to say that Alec always carried a gun. And I'm going to read a direct quote about the boat accident from Marianne on the stand. And she said, "We never talked about it. We never talked about finding the person who could have done it. It was just odd. We were sort of living in fear because we thought this horrible person was out there. We were mostly afraid for Alec and Buster, but we didn't know the motive behind the killings. We thought it probably had something to do with the boat case. And we thought that up until September, and then things started to change a little bit." Is that basically, Loni, an admission that her family now, after that point, thinks that maybe Alec did do this?
I mean, that's kind of the way I interpret it. And she hasn't been allowed to fully say in front of the jury, but that's when she found out from Jim, the person who's cross-examining her, that Alex had been found, you know, caught stealing, and he was fired. And so, yeah, that kind of opens that up. And you can tell that's where she kind of says everything changed for us. But I'll tell you, I thought another really credible point, and this is following up on what Sarah said, when, you know, she was saying he wanted to know, his main concern was to clear Paul's name. And then Jim goes, well, you wouldn't fault him for that, right? I mean, he loved Paul, the apple of his eye. Wasn't that important to Maggie too? I thought that was great cross-examination. And she said, yeah, it was really important to Maggie. And no, I don't fault him for that. And then he goes, so then why do you think it wasn't, important to him to find the killer too? And she paused and then she said, because he never talked to me about that. He talked to me about the boat case, but he never talked to me about, we need to find the killer. Who's the killer? And I thought that rang so true. And that right there is an example of an attorney asking that one question too much. He should have stopped. And I thought it was really good. But yeah, I think that's where the prosecution is going, is now things changed. And I don't know if they'll ever ask her, what do you believe? What do you think? But I think it's kind of clear from the questioning that things changed for her.
Yeah, and Amy,
I gotta say this. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like, I cannot get over this in my head about the guns. Like Jim Griffin going one step too far. Like, you're exactly right, Loni. Because with the guns, it was like, well, he always had a gun. Well, did he always have it on his person? And she's like, well, I mean, it was always right there. The car was right there. It's like, well, haven't we established that he says he went back to get a gun? Like, if he always had the gun on him and it was already, he had it in the car, yada, yada, yada. I mean, she's testifying just every time that Jim, it's just one step beyond where it needs to be. It's like, it's kind of like you're looking at it and you're like, my gosh, this is the most gorgeous person that I've ever seen. But something just misses the mark every single time. And it's seeing Jim in his cross, and Dick for that matter. It's like they go just one slight, and you're like, this is masterful for a second, and then it just drops. And it's frustrating watching it happen. You're like, stop.
I think it's safe to say Jim Griffin doesn't try cases.
Amy, anything you want to add about Marianne's testimony before we get to some STS comments and questions?
I think that, so I've been open and honest with this. I've been so torn, right, of whether he could do this or not. And I think part of it is because, like, I've listened to all of his jailhouse phone calls with his family and how tender and loving he is with his, we heard, some of them with Mandy Matney, but that's not a full depiction of what was going on those jailhouse calls at all. So I think I know a little bit more. I've seen the crime scene. I know why Paul's blood was not on him, because from here down, there's really not any blood, right? It's all from here up, that kind of thing. And so I've just been really, really torn in this whole thing. But it comes back to, I keep trying to explain away these things that are important, right? Like, why say, I think whoever did it has been planning it for a long time. Why would he never ask? Why does he want to clear Paul's name? I keep thinking, well, as a lawyer, Paul, they thought Paul was a killer, right? So now they want, he's dead now. But if I have to keep doing that with every damn witness that we have that comes forward, then I think we know what the answer is, and that maybe he did this, because you can't just sit and explain everything away.
So there are two tweets. These aren't really questions or comments, but tweets that I thought were interesting today, sort of funny in an odd way. From Miss Loops, she tweeted out, "Judge just asked the defense, are you a witness?" After Maggie's sister stated that lawyer Jim Griffin told her Alec was stealing the day Alec was shot. Doors have opened. The doors have opened. That was the theme of the day. And then Jeanetter tweeted out, I'm sorry, this is Hot Girl Joe tweeted out, "Jim is so deep in this case, I can't understand how he can be part of the defense. He's been at the crime scene, he's talked to family, and he's a friend of Alec. I feel like it's a big conflict of interest. It's something that we've all talked about, and it just seems like it defies logic." But Sarah, to you, the first real question comment here from Jeanetter. She writes, "Alec has used his ability to convince people everything he's done is completely explainable and excusable. I think he will take the stand because he thinks he's smarter than everyone in the room and will be believed." Do you agree with that comment?
I think that he thinks he's a little bit smarter, or maybe a lot smarter than everybody else. I think that he thinks that his reputation and his charisma has run Hampton County for, his entire life. And before that, his father and grandfather. I'm torn, because I know what I would want my client to do. I know what I would counsel my client to do, but sometimes you can't stop that. You can't make that happen. So I'm torn on that. I think that the right answer, in my opinion, would be for him not to testify because, I mean, I'm looking at this from, pretty prosecution friendly eyes here. And I think that they've got a pretty decent case already with reasonable doubt. So why would you potentially screw that up by putting the defendant, who we know is a liar, who we know is a thief, like who has had this entire life that, another life that nobody apparently knew about, why would you put him on the stand? I don't think I would do that, and I wouldn't want my client to do it.
Next question from Lisa Fort. To you, Loni. How could any shooter other than Alec get that close to Paul and Maggie and catch them in the exact places Paul's Snapchat caught them in such natural positions while Alec was clearly there? The state really, really needs to paint this picture.
Well, I think that's what the state was trying to do, with the medical examiner today, going through all of the trajectories and the directions, and essentially said that, Paul was shot within, the barrel was in 3 feet of his body on both shots, I believe. And that he was facing the shooter and his arm was down. It wasn't like he was in a defensive mode. And then the second one, he was kind of turning and looking at the shooter. And then the same thing with Maggie, that they were all up close. And then that's the argument, is that if it had been somebody else, they might have reacted differently, but they didn't seem to be surprised or, at the time they were. And as the, medical examiner said, look, this is all interpreting the data and the wounds. And I'm sure there's going to be a defense expert that gets on and says, we're going to interpret it a totally different way. So we'll see how that shakes out. A lot of times that's not necessarily the most persuasive evidence.
Next comment from Karen Mooring and Amy Lawrence Lovely. This one's for you. I am still on the fence as to whether Alec could do this alone. However, his presence at the kennels just moments before they were killed cannot be explained away. Could Alec pull this off without help? Is he physically capable of moving that fast to kill both? Just not 100% convinced at this point, but leaning toward guilt. I love your channel. You have the most amazing guests, as you can tell right now. This seems to be the thing that everyone is hung up on. But again, those kennel videos are really problematic for the defense.
It is, but we also don't really know time of death either, right? We know when the last phone call or the last time their cell phone, they read a text message, right? But that's kind of looking at things in a vacuum, right? We're only looking at that. There's these other things that are going on that we do know about. And one of those things is like Alex's car is traveling here. The phone is being essentially thrown out a window, what we believe, or tossed or wherever up the road, like that. It didn't make sense. And one of your, I can't remember the guy's name, and I apologize. He was one of your guests. He's a criminologist out of Florida, and he was like a gun expert, kind of. What was his name? You know,
talking about Joseph Scott Morgan.
Yes, I think. But he talked.
Alabama.
Yeah. I thought there's a. He the alibi, the girl with the sweet lies and alibi.
He's wearing white beard, good looking, handsome Southern man.
I love him. I really like him.
Yeah.
But one of the things he said is like, in all my years of studying crimes and doing these, watching all these court cases and trials and stuff, I've never seen 2 long guns used like this by one person ever. And I just don't think it makes sense. And I've always said, whether Alex did it or not, there was definitely somebody else there, right? And he knows exactly what happened. And I think that he's right on the money. For him to do this, like he's, a cowboy of all cowboys, pun intended. But it doesn't make sense. There obviously was somebody there with him. But also, like when I look at the timeline, when did he go get the shower to get all the and change clothes and ditch everything? Like, when did all this happen, if that's the case? Like, I can't put that together either.
I think if you guys are struggling, that's indicative of maybe what's going on with the jury, but we're going to find out probably in a week or so's time. The next comment here, and Loni, I'm going to throw this to you. This was interesting because this came from another commenter on another show. This one is from Smoocher. I'll read it and then I'll explain how this came up. They should have been able to tell from data on the phone exactly when the Snapchat video was taken just by looking at the phone's logs. Phones log just about everything. Even if the video wasn't transmitted via the phone signal, the timestamps should still be in the log. So we got a comment from someone saying, I monitor my kid's Snapchat, and it said my kid was at such and such place at such and such time. My kid was actually at home. Sometimes there's issues with uploads and downloads. I'm no tech guy, by the way, as you could tell from this episode when I had to call my IT director in, aka my wife. But I would assume that if there's any issue that could be brought up with these Snapchat videos, the 2 videos in question about timestamps, that the defense is going to do this when they get the case to, again, stir up reasonable doubt. But there are people saying that maybe it was shot earlier but didn't upload till 8:40, whatever the time was, 44, I think, or whatever the time was.
So there's 2 videos. The tree video was a Snapchat video.
Mhm.
And I don't know how Snapchat works because I'm not on it. So I don't know about the timing of, how they show when that is, but they're saying that was at 7-something 40.
Mhm.
And I don't know that the timing on that one's that so important anyways. It's just, to show, the prosecution's using it to show what clothing he was wearing before law enforcement got there, and defense is arguing it to say what a great relationship he had with his son. The other video in the dog kennel video is not a Snapchat. It is a camera video that he took on his phone that was never sent. So the only timestamp we have on that is 8:44. Now, can that be wrong? Maybe, I don't know, but that the prosecution is definitely throwing their case on that. I mean, that's why they are saying that he was there at the kennels 8:44. Now, usually you can find an expert to say almost anything. I don't know if defense will put on an expert to say that, but we don't have to worry about the Snapchat issue on that one, and that's the one I think where the time is crucial.
Yep, that's a good point.
Can I ask you a question about that Snapchat video real quick? So I asked my husband, I said, "Hey, babe, what color is this shirt?" Because Blanca was he kept saying it was a seafoam green. No man knows the difference between blue, baby, light blue and seafoam green. I said, "Hey, babe, what color is the shirt?" He goes, "Light blue." I go, "Yeah, no." I thought that's what a man would say, right? I just didn't see that was such a big deal that he was acting like he was wearing a different shirt. I was like, it looked like a light blue shirt to every other man I've ever seen.
But he wasn't saying the color. He was saying it was a Vinnie Vines, and she was saying, no, that's a Columbia shirt. And if anybody knew that clothing, man, Blanca, I thought was an amazing.
It's all a bunch of coastal, but it's all a bunch of coastal looking stuff. My husband don't know what a Vinnie Vines is either. He just knows what I put in his closet.
I love being a part of this. Cruise Boston 638. It is, and Sarah, this one's for you. It is in all caps, completely obvious now what the defense is planning. Please, Joel, do a show on this very likely scenario. Defense and Alex seem trapped by the Snapchat video. We're talking about the kennel video, not the actual Snapchat video. The questioning of the lady who performed autopsies today shows they're going to go with Paul shot Maggie and then himself in a murder-suicide. Alec will then say he right away went to officers arriving on scene, mentioned the boat accident to deflect from the murder-suicide he had just witnessed by his son. Do you see this unfolding?
Well, certainly not all in caps. That's not. I don't think it's that obvious. I think that all of us are trying to look at it from all sorts of different angles. Like, what are the possibilities here? And the only thing I think I know today that I didn't know 4 weeks ago is that nothing is really obvious when it comes to this trial. You think it's going one way, and then you're like, where the heck did that come from? And it takes a left and it takes her, and you're like, so no, I don't know that that's what they're going to do. I don't know that they even know right now what they're going to do. I mean, maybe they do, but it seems like maybe not. So no, I don't agree with that.
I think I think there is one thing that we definitely do know. We know that Alex Murdaugh is a thief. I think we know that.
Oh, we got that. Yeah.
All this testimony, we know he's a thief.
As far as strategy, though, I don't think anybody knows what their strategy is. Either. What are we doing?
Speaking of strategy, out of the presence of the jury, when they're arguing whether or not Eddie Smith's testimony is going to come in and stuff like that. I mean, Jim and Dick conceded that his client admitted to the financial crimes, right? Which they've never done before in open court. And then pretty much admitted that he was a liar, right? And then we heard Creighton, which it's like, whew, like, what are you doing? And then you hear Creighton go, listen, if you'll concede on the record that your client's a liar, that's good enough for me. And then
Yeah,
all of a sudden
let's
they start backing up, and I'm like, well, the shit's out of that donkey. We already heard it. Like, you know what I mean? We got you. Go ahead and concede and be done with Eddie. Leave him alone.
Couple more questions and comments here. This one, Lonnie, for you from left of you. If the videos prove he didn't snap, they also prove that he was there, that he lied about being there, and that he changed his clothes from what he was wearing in the videos that put him there before he called the police. The evidence will find him guilty. It's so interesting. Everyone's got a different take, but that's sort of a salient point that it might not have shown him snapping, but it did prove that he was there.
I think that is the strongest piece of evidence right now for the prosecution is he is there. So what are you gonna do about that, right? I mean, that's and I think that video with everybody saying that's his voice on it, as long as that timestamp holds. But then, like Amy said, the defense, we haven't heard their case yet. They're gonna try and push that time of death out. So maybe it gives Alec time to get back from the kennels into his car and gone at the time. But I think that is the strongest piece of evidence. And if it holds up, that's a good piece of evidence for the prosecution.
I keep thinking this guy is like a lawyer, right? He's smart enough to pass the bar exam, which is the hardest thing I've ever done besides give birth, right? And I'm just thinking this guy's smart. So like, why does he only leave for like 40 minutes? Why would he just not be gone a couple hours and just go lay into bed with your mom, watch some game shows, roll back and be like, oh my God, when did this happen? Like, why did he only go for like this short period of time and come back? It's weird. That doesn't make sense either if you're a murderer.
Lisa writes, yep, when Snapchat came out, I was like, they got him in the video. But when I heard them so matter of fact and not angry, now that gives me doubt. So everyone's got a different take. The only ones that matter are the jurors deciding this case. Smoocher writes, I don't understand why people think he couldn't shoot Paul with one gun, put it down, pick up another gun, and shoot Maggie, all in far less than a minute. He wouldn't have to be dual wielding two guns and swinging them around on both hands like he's an actor in an old Western. The family had a ton of guns, and they often left them lying around, according to others who were familiar with the family and the property. It's not at all surprising that multiple guns would be at the kennels. Do you agree with that, Sarah?
I do. I think that, to say like, there's no way he could have done that in that amount of time. I disagree. I think that he absolutely could have done that in that amount of time. I mean, we've heard how guns were so much a huge part of their lives and how guns were everywhere. I don't think just because it was two separate guns that it's like, oh, well, there had to have been a second shooter. No, I don't think so. I think that he absolutely could have done it in that short time frame with two separate guns. Yeah, no question.
I absolutely think he could do it with two guns, right? It's just really weird. It's odd. But this is
everything is weird about this, Amy, though. This whole thing is
the whole fucking thing is awfully weird.
Yeah. Nothing makes sense.
So like, when does he have time to shower, change his clothes, get rid of them, and dump some guns? Because I'm looking at his GPS stuff and I'm like, I'm trying to figure out how he's like carved this out, right? Somewhere along the way.
It's like the little messages I get like this that make me go, huh? And this is what the state should say. He said he didn't go to the kennels. He took a nap instead. Case closed. He's lying. He was there.
Oh, I was like, he took a nap? Nah, he didn't take a nap.
I mean, I don't know. If he's, I don't know. Little things add up to big things. My favorite comment of the day, and then we'll wrap it up. Barbara Florence. If he's acquitted, he can date Casey Anthony. Lonnie, do you think they would make a good couple? It's a weird couple.
I can't even go there. I can't even. Even if he's acquitted on this, he's still facing a lot of financial crimes, which can keep him in prison for life. So I don't see him getting out anytime soon.
Let me tell you what my husband said. My husband said, he said this day, and I was laughing. This is actually, I'm going to read his text message to our group text message. This is what he said. He said, let's be honest. If he walks on this, he said, if he walks on this, I was laughing. Dude's walking free. He liquidates everything, pays everybody off. He's out in 5, market, probably practicing law in 7.
I don't know if I can buy that. Sarah Ford is rolling her eyes for those who are listening.
I don't think he would get that much time. I mean, when I pull up.
Oh, come on, Amy.
Oh, I think he would get no more than 12 years. Everybody's been paid back, right? I mean, you're going to have Eric Bland and Mark Tinsley is going to be showing their ass. But like, we know that white collar crimes don't get I mean, the best thing that could happen to him is the feds took it, right? And rolled with the financial crimes. That would be the best for him because we know that they don't get time. They don't, I mean, I think he would get at max 12 years. Max.
I'm going to go way over on that, Amy. I'll take
non-violent out in 6 unless they make an example of him. But I think to make an example of him, all the stuff from that law firm comes in, right? All the knowledge that they had or did not have. And I've always said somebody in that firm knew what he was doing because you don't write checks to Forge writes checks to you. That was the red flag.
Sarah, how long do you think he would, if he's convicted on these 99 financial crimes? It was my understanding he's going to basically go away for life if he's convicted of all those crimes.
I mean, I think that he's done for. I mean, in my opinion, 5, 7, no way. I mean, absolutely not. I mean, just the fact that he was a lawyer who completely violated every ounce of trust with these completely vulnerable clients over and over and over again. I can't think of one judge that I've ever been in front of in South Carolina that's going to be like, oh, sorry, Alec, we'll see you in 5 years. No way. But hey, if I'm wrong, I'll buy drinks, Amy. If I'm wrong, I'll buy drinks. But
okay. So in our county, we had a CPA, right, that was taking people's tax money, like their refunds or their tax payments, and he had stolen millions and millions of dollars. As a matter of fact, an associate attorney was telling me, she used to be a public defender, was telling me about this case, and he got probation. I mean, because he's tied to the Murdaughs, maybe because it's made a big splash, he's going to, they're going to tax him with, like I said, I see max him getting 12 to 15, max. And then he'd be out in 6 or 7 because you're only going to do 50% of it.
Hate to do this. Got to wrap the show because yours truly is about to be on court TV with his lovely mom. So a special occasion, but thank you to one and all for joining us. We appreciate it. We'll do it again next week. And hopefully we can get Amy Zimmercheck added to this group. It'll keep growing like the Brady Bunch, this lovely family that we have here. But thank you so much. Quick programming note. We're going to be live. You can get your true crime fill with Detective Phil Waters this Friday and Sunday. Carm on the case with a live episode, 7 p.m. Until then, love you, America.